on sexual harassment. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, glad to be here.
It is a big deal. Obviously, I remember in the late 80s, there was some Supreme Court cases that really brought sexual harassment to the forefront, and there was a lot going on at the time. Then it got quiet again. Maybe we learned our lesson, or maybe it just sat dormant, or maybe people stopped talking about it, but nobody has stopped talking about it for the past year. And the number of people that have been tossed out of boards and offices and the White House for sexual harassment is really incredible. Now, maybe it shouldn't surprise us, and you're going to tell us, because maybe this is going on all over the place, and we need to figure out how to stop it. But thanks for joining us. Let's start right off. This new kind of emphasis on sexual harassment, what does that tell you about what's going on in the workplace?
Well, for the first thing, it's not really an epidemic, because that suggests that something just happened. Mm-hmm. It's been happening. You're right. It's been going on all along, and people haven't been complaining about it, or things haven't been done about it. The rules were set up in 1981 by the EEOC, and there have been court cases since that have pretty much laid out the way things work and what the laws are. But companies haven't really changed behavior. They're doing the training. They're getting people to sign off saying, I saw the training, so they could defend themselves. I saw the video.
Right.
Yeah, and it ends up being an active defense, not how to change behavior to make a better workplace.
And that's, I think, a good point, Ken Cooper. That is, how do you protect yourself from being sued is one thing. And for a lawyer like me, that's important. On the other hand, how do you create a workplace environment that people aren't afraid to show up at, actually want to come to work? That's a whole nother issue.
It's really about creating a culture. So, for example, we try to show that harassment is loser behavior. A guy walks up to a woman in a bar and says, hey, can I buy you a drink? And gets told no. Or a man walks up to a coworker and says, can we have dinner tonight? And she says no. There's 3.7 million other women on earth. Go find one that likes you. Don't sit here and push yourself.
Or that's thirsty, or that's hungry.
Yeah, don't push yourself off. I mean, people marry criminals, for heaven's sakes. There's somebody out there for you, okay?
Right.
So once you start setting the culture that you're a buffoon when you do this, you're what they call a pronoid. You have delusions of persecution if you're a paranoid. A pronoid has delusions of acceptability.
Right.
You think you're cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I love she got to be a lesbian. She said no to me.
Or she loves me. Oh,
right.
She really loves me. I know it was no, but she really loves me.
Yeah. So talk about, how do you do that then? We have, throughout law school, throughout college, I worked in restaurants and bars, and, the culture in those is just atrocious. But sometimes you can find similar cultures almost anywhere. It's not limited to places like, bars and restaurants. How do you create that culture then, after years of people not really caring or not caring enough?
Yeah, we call it the frat boy culture,
right?
At work. And you see it in the way they party after work. You see it in the kinds of things they'll pay for the expense report. And so it starts right at the top. Company has to say, listen, this has got to stop. We want an engaged workforce. Probably over half of our employees are women, and we've got to have them productive and happy and doing good work, or else we're not going to be successful.
So if you were a boss right now, and you're a mid-sized company, and you wanted to set and you wanted to say, here are 2 or 3 things, right off the bat that are going to change around here, or that we're going to make sure aren't happening, what would those be?
I think you ought to teach people the behaviors needed. In other words, everybody learns the legals. What are the requirements for the EOC? Great, I got that. Mm-hmm. Now what do I go do? Walk out of the meeting more confused than ever. So what we try to do is give people easy measures of how to know when you're going near the line, or how you know when you're going across the line. For example, would you like to see whatever you're doing on the front page of the Wall Street Journal?
Right.
Would you be happy about that? Would you do it in front of your significant other? Would you do it to the CEO's boss? Would you do it to a football player's girlfriend in a bar with him standing there, and feel okay about it? Would you be able to explain why you had to do it? It's called the need principle. Those are all things that tell you right away. In fact, merely asking the question when somebody says, well, should I put my arm around somebody? Is that okay? As soon as you ask it, the answer is no. The fact that there was doubt in your mind shows you, hey, there's something wrong. Just don't go there.
Right. I think there is a difference, and maybe I'm going to ask you about what is actually sexual harassment, because there are different cultures where maybe a hug is something that people do. You may have been it may be a small company. It may have you may have known people for a long time, and at a particular event or something occurs, and you give somebody a hug. So, oh, give me a hug. I suppose it's this new movement doesn't mean you can't touch someone. It just means you have to think about why am I doing it, and is it appropriate under these circumstances? Or are you saying, no, you know what, touching's out, period, no questions asked?
Well, one of my books is on body language in business, and there are zones of touching about our body. So you can touch somebody on the elbow, you can't touch somebody on the knee. And, they both have about the same prurient interest, an elbow or a knee. But one of them you just don't do because of the way the culture is built.
Right.
Well, these zones are built in there. And so the touch principle, we're very English. We don't like to be touched. In fact, in a bar, you put your hands on somebody, you're likely to get punched.
Right.
Certain cultures will say, get your hands off.
Right.
So women don't like to be manhandled. People come up and guys will come up and, let me give you a back rub. And the women just cringe. They hate that.
Right. And again, I hear this all the time, this notion of hugging. We have people that'll come into the studio and they'll pose for photos. Love having photos. Post them up there. Now, after Al Franken, don't know what to do with my hands. Do I just hold my hands up in the air and say, as I stand next to somebody? I hate to think we've gone so far that you can't, pose for a picture. But again, what do you think, Ken Cooper, expert on sexual harassment?
There are acceptable zones of touching. Small of the back, somebody's shoulder. Women will tell you, though, there's two kinds of touches. So you can have that friendly kind of an arm on your shoulder and don't think anything of it. And then they'll talk about that creepy, slimy, soft, cringe-worthy hand.
Moving hand.
Yeah, and same hand on the shoulder, same place, and one of them's fine, and the other one is just horrible.
Yeah. All right. So what is the profile then? I think we all think we know who the sexual harassers are, the Herb Tarlicks of going back to WKRP days, those kind of guys. That's not always the case. CEOs these days seem to be pretty good at sexual harassing. What is the profile?
According to research, it's generally someone in authority over the person. So there's some sort of power relationship in there. It could very well be, most cases are a male harassing a female. But a lot of people say, well, what about a female harassing a male? Well, that's actually the fourth most likely to happen. Second most likely is male harassment of another male. Third is female harassment of another female, and less than 1%, about 0.6%, is a female harassment of a male. So it's someone in a power position, typically a male offender to a female target.
Talk about the psychology at work in the sexual harassment incident. You talk about the differences in of power, but I think it could also be right at that coworker level. And why is that? Even though you can't influence someone, that is, you can't give them a raise, you can't fire them, you can't do anything for them, but it's still sexual harassment at that level. Why is that?
When there's the same power, it takes on almost more of a style of bullying. It's the way the crowd deals with somebody they're attacking. So, for example, a very likely case is, let's say a woman goes into an all-male job. She's the only woman there. So oftentimes harassment can happen just because you're the lone person and the group gangs up on you in a bully fashion.
Right. I talk to people in my job as a lawyer and counseling employers. Basically, my job is not like yours to train them, but to talk about it. And what I try to explain is that thing you were laughing about today, that thing you were taking a picture of today, and was everyone agreed that it was really funny and it was all in good fun. When that person gets fired, all of a sudden the story changes 100%. And now that picture comes into court and the woman or the man says, no, I didn't think that was funny at all. And I felt awful about it and I wish they hadn't done it. You have to think about these things. It's the story's never going to be the same in 6 months, a year, or 2 years from when it occurs.
Well, and the story often plays different than it says. I call it the say versus play. And it's like your teenage kid who says, you yell at them, hey, go clean up your room. And they yell back, I will. And so you say, hey, you don't talk to me that way. And they say, oh, I said I would. I mean, what's the problem? So harassment comes that way. They'll say it one way, but then when they replay it, it's different. And yet it was offensive the first time.
Right. And even beyond that, many people who are being harassed will give that smile of like, oh, yeah, funny, until the frustration kind of breaks them. And then, it was never funny to them. And they don't get around to saying it. And, again, you're never going to know, I think, if they don't tell you, one. But you shouldn't put them in that position where they have to eventually tell you. I mean, it just shouldn't get there. How often do you see that in your training? You say, wow, I didn't even know what I was doing was making someone uncomfortable.
You'll see that. In fact, you hope the right way things should go is somebody does something and the target says, listen, I was really I think out of line, please don't do it again. And the guy says, oh, I'm so sorry, and sincerely says it. I'm so sorry I didn't know. Thanks for telling me. It'll never happen again. That's exactly what you want to have happen. In fact, the EOC says you've got to tell somebody it's unwelcome or perhaps your complaint won't hold up.
Right. But don't you find also that people will not say something the first, the second, the third, the 20th, the 50th time, and then they kind of break? And then it comes back and they say, this has been going on forever. And it should have been obvious. There is conduct that should be obvious, I think, to people, and yet it isn't. Is really of conduct okay if somebody doesn't say stop it?
Well, as you may have run across, there's a legal principle called the should-have-known principle. So certain acts have been called, they were so obvious, it was so apparent to a reasonable person, whatever that is, that they should have known it would have been offensive. If I put a tool calendar up with a bunch of topless women in it, okay, that's not something somebody has to complain about. I should have known that wasn't the thing to do. It's pretty obvious.
What do you do then when you come into a business? How do you help that business protect itself and more importantly, train its workforce so that the culture is one that is conducive to work and not harassment?
Well, what we'll do is first we'll add the behavioral component to their training so that all employees see not only the legalities, but what they're expected to do. And then we'll hold separate training for the managers. And that will be in terms of how to respond, how to prevent. So, for example, we have 13 signs of harassment before they complain. To your point of it's been happening, you know what? The employee was telling you, you just never picked up on it. So we'll train the managers on those special skills to prevent it. The whole point is to not have it happen. Stop it before it gets bad.
Can you tell us some of those that people might, take back and just kind of look at, you should have seen this coming?
Somebody suddenly dresses differently. They start hanging around with different people. They go out to lunch with different people. I make sarcastic comments in meetings about one person in particular. They avoid somebody. They sit across from them. They'll give them looks, dirty looks, or you'll hear the office grapevine talking about it, and you just didn't pay enough attention. Those kinds of things, once you look back, you say, oh, man, I should have known.
Right. What do you think going forward, the future? Are we going to see this continue to be an issue into 2018, 2019, or are we going to get our arms around it?
I don't think we're done. I think we're going to see more folks coming forward saying, hey, here's what happened. But the real issue is that the big cases draw attention, but it's all that little harassment that's still going on. That's what's got to stop in the workplace. So I think you're going to see that starting to get uncovered.
How do people reach out to you when they want to bring you in and train their folks?
Easiest way is to go to the website, which is stopshnow.com, stopshnow.
Ken Cooper, CooperCom, trainer of corporations, big and small, on the issues of sexual harassment. You're right. I agree with you. We have not heard the end of all the sexual harassment in 2018. Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
Appreciate it.